So anyway, I've got a video here. I'm going to do this video. It's something I've written and I've been emailing around the place. And it's a very much upgraded version of the Revelation of the 8 Laws. Because it has some issue, you know, some data there, pre-discovery data, and it's got the open letter to the world, which is the Revelation of the 8 Laws, and then it's got the post-discovery data points, right? And that makes for really good reading. That's on my Facebook page, and that'll be under the video, under this video, how to find it. So I'm going to read it now. I'll read you what it is. Right? Senior data points pre-discovery. Now you all know this, all the news, the theatre, you know, there's a lot of theatre going on. And but here's some senior points about New Zealand. And yeah, senior data points pre-discovery. With all these years of the political taking over the personal sphere, there has never been any reminder of the concepts of respect and courtesy. And that is no lie. The media has been extremely active at promoting feminism, gender equality and all these things, and never have they mentioned respect and courtesy, right? And I'm thinking what it is their true purpose is to eliminate respect and courtesy from the personal sphere, you know. It is increasingly difficult to buy a house. It's actually impossible for anyone who hasn't already got, you know, considerable kind of wealth at the moment. Social statistics are getting worse while the best efforts to effect positive change are not working. Youth are increasingly acting unsettled. The event of youth suicide is the highest in the OECD. And in New Zealand that's true. We have the highest youth suicide rate, right, in the OECD. The Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, I think that is. The numbers of suicide are at the highest levels per capita. Prison population are at the highest levels ever, and second only to the US per capita. The level of homelessness that exists. Mental health services being swamped with people in need. Unprecedented levels of uptake in NGO level social services. The common practice in the macro situation and in the micro situation of individuals being highly focused on emotional social problems and being vocal to others at a high frequency is promoting anxiety as virtuous, when all the problems they speak of have their genesis in an anxiety. This is a pattern of circular logic. An open letter to the world. I want to tell everyone that I have discovered something that my hypothesis contends is the cause of wholesale unwillingness and inhibition that presides over all thought and communication, and is present at every opportunity. There is a conscious effort to bring understanding and resolution and a means to address the causes of conflict and chaos, both in the individual and in the group setting. All of academia and all of the millions of man hours spent trying to address the causes of depression and anxiety, and all the resulting outcomes of, have effectively come to nothing but a growing tide. With literally billions of man hours spent by the most highly qualified academic minds in history on this problem that is now rampant in the world, all the universities, hospitals, medical professionals, and all the efforts of governments of the world have made little or no impact on the causes of this phenomenon of mankind. Why? These issues are rampant in society, causing and inflicting harm to many people. So I analysed this mountain of data of all the results of policies and all the peoples and all the lifestyles and beliefs of the human race, and I have miraculously been able to produce a mathematically provable reason that is the cause of these and many other problematic situations like the causes of conflict and the way communication influences thinking and the outcome of all decisions at all levels of society. The common practice is that it is like trying to catch painful smoke to understand and communicate about the extreme personal situations that lead people to cause harm to themselves or others. This is something everyone knows very well. The presupposition to the discovery of the 8 laws is the realization on the 17th of the 5th, 2016, is that anxiety is in fact a political entity that is comprised of 8 laws. These 8 laws of anxiety effectively inhibits and prohibits people from communicating. The hypothesis contends that all the scientists, religion, and all the others that have tried to find an answer have failed because they are all prohibited from going outside the boundaries of the 8 laws of anxiety. And when one and all believes in these 8 laws, success in this area has historically and recently been an abject failure. The only real tangible outcome is that it has resulted in the compounded reassertion that the 8 laws of anxiety are of paramount importance and in fact are the highest held ideals in all cultures. Perceiving anxiety as a political entity has the effect that anxiety becomes something one may, figuratively speaking, hold in one hand and examine the components that provide the functions it performs. One may consider the political reality of and examining the multiple overlapping anti-tamper measures it utilises and the several potential combinations that may be used offensively and aggressively to achieve any outcome that is within the jurisdiction of the 8 laws of anxiety. The hypothesis contends that abuse and violence of any description are within the bounds permissible according to the 8 laws of anxiety, and it can be assumed that according to the politically correct hard line of the 8 laws of anxiety, that one may inflict harm purely to attract goodwill from this virtual deity and anyone that believes that anxiety is virtuous. When considering the cause of anxiety and depression, it's not the elephant in the room, but it is that we are living inside the elephant. A consideration of the utmost importance in the inception of the 8 laws is that the baby does not use language to think, but thinks with political optics. The significance of this is that all the world uses language to try and resolve these issues, but sadly, it can only be said that the issue has no understanding of language, because as adults we still use political optics to think with. We instinctively conceptualize the process according to the means of expression. While the little baby does not use language to think, there is only consciousness, and in the first hours and days this new reality baby wakes up to is so completely different. It's such a culture shock. The baby witnesses the adult world of the emotional and the political and becomes fluent in the politics of anxiety almost immediately, being the only experience a newborn baby has had, and it is this understanding that is imprinted on the very foundation of the mind. The baby then grows and learns to talk, and in doing so the anxiety becomes a political entity because it has complete dominance over language by virtue of how it governs thought. Considering the nature of anxiety, the child is compelled to conceal his/her anxieties. The child automatically makes allowances for others to conceal their anxieties. What follows is an unspoken political agreement that produces the 8 laws of anxiety that every human being in history has been unfailingly loyal to. These are the 8 laws of anxiety. First law of anxiety is one must conceal one's anxieties. The second law of anxiety is to allow all others to conceal their anxieties. The third law of anxiety is to accept at all times when a person seeks to ignore. The fourth law of anxiety is to accept without question the dishonesty that results from the first 3 laws. The fifth law of anxiety is to at all times acquiesce to they which are expressing the most anxiety. The sixth law of anxiety is never, by way of action, fail to express support for the 8 laws of anxiety. The seventh law of anxiety is one must at every opportunity seek to undermine and maintain ongoing disruption for anyone that seeks to challenge the laws of anxiety. The eighth law of anxiety is all people must at every opportunity promote anxiety as wisdom. These 8 laws of anxiety are the definitive reason the human factor issues in the world societies have not been mitigated after millions of man-hours of the most highly qualified minds in academia and science. The 8 laws of anxiety enforce up to 97% reduction in the quality of communication, including thought. All because the baby does not think with language, but with political optics. That the media constantly focus on failures is the 8 laws at work. As with the corporate finance industry's self-perception and interest in maintaining their position as the moral authority over society is the 8 laws at work. This is why it seems we are working for them. Nobody knows because everyone is in on it, and all of the established pillars of society are again mirror images of the political aspiration of the aggressive stance of the 8 laws, as are the social mores of the defensive stance group. The contention is that the values of anxiety are culture shocked into existence by the event of birth, and the first days dictate how strong that first impression is, and the rest is literally history. An amnesty of life. The discovery on the 17th of the 5th, 2016 of that anxiety is actually a political entity that is comprised of 8 laws and subsequent bylaws and statutes. You, like all people, know these 8 laws and political mechanisms because it's the only thing we've ever done to validate the hypothesis of the 8 laws. The evidence is all around us in the statistics of domestic violence, abuse, addictions and crime in general, but most significantly, the march of the commercial world's values overwriting community values. And now Kiwis can't buy a house. The immigrant labour levels and a government that seems to be only a government of the economy but not the country. This is the situation for people because anxiety has been able to operate freely and achieve anything according to the political aspiration of anxiety, and the world has not been able to stage a challenge to it. Now that I've discovered this phenomenon of humanity, maybe we can talk freely and the people can see each other for the first time, because this qualification of anxiety as a political entity enables one to figuratively hold anxiety in one's hand and look at it, rendering anxiety visible and tangible. And something tangible was crucial to be able to understand and talk about and know about. It is everything a child could want to understand this world they are growing up in. So here are the senior data points post-discovery. It is the event of birth that culture shocks the values of anxiety into existence. 2. The newborn baby that does not possess language has the singular event that conceptualizes reality, exclusively utilizes the political optics to think with. When the baby starts to speak, the baby instinctively learns to conceptualize the process of thought according to the means to express. When the baby that does not possess language starts to speak, anxiety transmogrifies into a political entity. To coexist with others, the baby that does not possess language must embrace a lifestyle that qualifies as Stockholm Syndrome to fit in with the group. Stockholm Syndrome, the compulsion to protect oneself, catalyzes the first law. According to the character of consciousness, which is baby's true nature, baby allows others to conceal their anxieties, catalyzing the second law, but for baby and consciousness it is the first law. 7. Anxiety is a political entity because it seizes control of thought, then language. 8. It is the repeated and sustained political, emotional ambushes while a baby that does not possess language causes a massive retraction in consciousness, and this is what causes depression. It is when 9. It is when consciousness finds out that it must participate and embrace an existence where it is politically correct to lie through one's teeth that causes depression, and this is seen by the baby that does not possess language via the political optics of the people's behaviour. The baby is around in the first days, weeks, years before beginning to speak. 10. The consequence that consciousness exists within the jurisdiction of the first two laws is why people are told as small kids they only use 10% of their brain. It is the maximum allowable expression of consciousness while within the jurisdiction of the first two laws. The consequence of the fourth law, that is, all people must accept without question the dishonesty that is caused by the first three laws, sets the political topography in the micro and the macro because it catalyses the 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th laws, which are specifically conceptualized according to how consciousness acknowledges anxiety. The 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th laws dictate, 12, the 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th laws dictate what is politically credible when the group believes that anxiety is virtuous, or the individual that values courage because courage acknowledges anxiety. The 13, the 5th law being all people must acquiesce to they that which are expressing the most anxiety, is a central pillar of the political sphere being empowered by the 2nd law. Belief in these 14. Belief in these 8 laws of anxiety is why there can be no answer when people react negatively towards others. It is why it seems a sacred right for one to express emotional aggression to others, because it is according to the 2nd law, the 5th law, the 6th law, the 8th law, and a measure of the 7th law. 15. Objectivity dictates, considering the discovery that anxiety is a political entity, that religion has been exclusively derived from the senior elements of the political correctness of anxiety. 16. Many arguments, hold on, that one there, religion has been exclusively derived from the political senior elements of the political correctness of anxiety. I think that being the case is why religion has been made how it has been made, to fit against this boundary system of the 8 laws of anxiety. 16. Many arguments are conducted exclusively by way of negotiating between parties involved of their personal perspective of how the political correctness of anxiety is virtuous, and the goal of both is to uphold the virtue of anxiety, particularly in public settings. 17. That courage acknowledges anxiety, but anxiety does not acknowledge courage as a central pillar of the political sphere. 18. The function of money is the great impostor of the function of consciousness. 19. That the event of anxiety in the mind, given political credibility by the group, has governed the development of language as well as civilization itself, by virtue of the replication of the function of anxiety being that which dictates political credibility. 20. That anxiety exists at the quantum level of thought, triggers the nervous system into being active when the body and mind are inactive. 21. That the two political groups known as rich and poor have identical perception of their respective group. Neither are friends with many outside their group. Both seem to believe that they are better than all others, lacking empathy. And both are self-obsessed. Neither value education by virtue of and in the belief of the political correctness of anxiety. Both believe that anxiety is virtuous. The silent majority, that is the middle class, pay for the lifestyle of both rich and poor by virtue of the belief in consciousness. That is, courage, that causes the behaviour of being concerned with the welfare of others, and of being creative and of being industrious. 23. That this qualification of anxiety now exists, you may now figuratively hold anxiety in your hand and examine the function and mechanism of the 8 laws and how the multiple overlapping anti-tamper measures in concert with the overt utilisation of the facet, that is, that courage acknowledges anxiety, to maintain dominance over an individual group. It is the sign, 24, it is the sign of they that believe that anxiety is virtuous, of being averse to communication, that none shall be invited to enter their domain should challenged by way of being a willing and willful communicator, is to make obvious that they are incapable of an intelligent dialogue and be of little or be averse to procuring solutions. 25. The political optics of the tone of one's voice is the medium of communication primary to consciousness and also anxiety. This is the true economy of the political. 26. This is why politicians have to answer to the media that aggressively pursue transgressions, real or imagined. The political optics of both are the same. This is the central quantum element of all language and the true substance of verbal expression. 27. With this qualification that anxiety is a political entity, one may figuratively hold anxiety in one's hand and look at it. A very different matter to it being like trying to catch pain with smoke to talk about. In doing so, from where and with what are you looking at anxiety? The qualification of anxiety as a political entity has had the remarkable consequence of qualifying consciousness as real. 29. This qualification makes anxiety tangible, which is the essential missing link when trying to understand the mind's function. This serves to explain why, after literally billions of man-hours of research by the best minds in history into the matter of the actual function of the mind, the statistics of social issues are getting increasingly worse. 30. The media constantly compelling the public to focus on problems has the political optic they are promoting anxiety as wisdom, while all the problems have their genesis in an anxiety. This is a pattern of circular logic. 31. The teenager rebelling against the parent is doing so because the child's consciousness has expanded beyond the political boundaries set by the parent, which is pretty much always an anxiety thing, right? The anxiety sets the political boundaries, right? 32. The parent with the argumentative child almost exclusively uses the threat of danger to have the child acquiesce to their fears. And this has had the political optic that anxiety is wisdom and virtuous. The child rebels because children have an extremely strong faith and courage and consciousness. 33. When a person believes that anxiety is wisdom, it evaporates the concept of anxiety. Concurrently, when a person believes that anxiety is wisdom, it also evaporates the concept of courage. 34. Anxiety exists 80% in the imperative, which is the belief that anxiety is wisdom, and as anxiety has control of thought at the quantum level in the individual and in the group, this is why there has never been made the judgment that anxiety controls languages and therefore the means to understand anxiety. 35. That anxiety is culture shocked into existence and that anxiety then exists at the quantum level of thought. This triggers the nervous system into being active while we are inactive. And when tension is present, the nerves are already energized to a high level. The long-term exposure to adrenaline and decaying adrenaline has a negative effect on the physical body, and it has a negative effect on the emotional response, which is being sensitive and reactive. There are more, as you will have had your own experience, that come with unique situational nuances. Okay, so that's what I wrote. That's what I've been sending around. That's what I sent to MediaWorks. So I sent to the Salvation Army. That's what I've sent to a whole bunch of eminent psychologist people. That's what I've sent to a whole lot of parliamentarians. I've seen it all over the place, man. That's what I've sent to Jim Carrey. I've sent that to Tama Iti. If you're over in the world there, you know, up in the northern hemisphere and that, you should Google Tama Iti. That's Tamaiti. He's a Maori chief in a Maori tribe that did not sign to the Treaty of Waitangi, man. So I've sent it to just all sorts of people, man, just all sorts of people, and I've been handing it out around town too. Like that, there, the post-discovery data points, I haven't been because they didn't exist when I printed up the proclamation of the Tino Party leaflet that I was handing out. And so I'll be doing some more of these, but I'll be handwriting on them directions to the Facebook here. So if you go to Facebook and you look at the you look down the list of posts, okay. Here's one, 11th August. I've reposted it at the 11th August, and so that's just down from the top, just above the first Stephen Lawrence Southern video I made the other day. So yeah, that's the thing of it. You know, there's all these things going on, man. I'm just sick of it, I'm just sick of it, man. I'm getting pretty blunt with bloody MediaWorks, man. And you know, TVNZ, right? The thing is with these two media outfits in New Zealand, they've put in place measures so people can't make contact with them. You know, the TV3 there, MediaWorks, they run a talkback radio show that masquerades as the political radio, right? Because they go to talk about that. Yet they're not, man. They're not. They're doing the same thing, and they do in all the other instances where they have a compulsion to maintain anxiety as the moral authority, actually. And so I'm interested in stopping all this, I really am, And so if you look at that, you can see that this is something very tangible